Welcome to Superstitions and Traditions, our podcast about history, shenanigans, and us questioning their sanity.
Still today.
I'm Kristen.
And I'm Trish.
And today
Kristen's aunt.
She is my aunt, yes. Today we are going to talk about the Chicago World's Fair in 1893.
Oh, wow.
They had fun then.
They did.
I mean, some of us. There were classes and races and things excluded from the fun, but...
Well, yes, not everyone got to have fun.
Not everyone got to have fun.
But a select few had a great time.
They did. Select few. Great time. All right. So I'm going to start with a story.
Okay. Well, I love it.
So if you are watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify, leave us a comment. Give us your thoughts. We want to hear them. Be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss any of the fun in the future.
Right. Exactly.
We have lots of future fun planned.
I can't wait.
I know, me either. All right, so let's jump in.
All right, I'm ready.
The train ride to Chicago was long. Due to financial crisis of the time, I couldn't afford the luxury of a Pullman car. I barely remember the ferry ride to the fairgrounds from my hotel on Van Buren Street in downtown, 7 miles away. My 50-cent piece was heavy in my hand for the admission, almost burning my palm in anticipation. Arriving the first thing in the morning, the sight of the White City was breathtaking. Architects from Chicago and New York brought the Beaux Arts classical designed buildings to prominence in a way only Daniel Burnham's dream could. Set in the midst of Frederick Law Olmsted's landscaped paths, lagoons, Venetian-inspired waterways, and wooded island, it was as if I had walked into a painting. The buildings were showcases for the best of the best inventions, art, innovations of the time. I chose July 4th to be there for the fireworks display, but as I walked across the North Canal Bridge off Columbia Avenue into the Manufacturers and Liberal Arts Building with its glass ceiling, I had already forgotten about it. The view alone of the Court of Honor was worth the half-day's pay to get in.
Wow.
I tried new foods, Cracker Jacks, juicy fruit gum, cream of wheat, Aunt Jemima's pancakes with a mix you could take home.
Oh.
Hershey's chocolate, shredded wheat, brownies, and the Vienna hot dog.
Wow.
I drank a Pabst beer. It won a blue ribbon there.
I see a name change there going on later. Okay.
I saw a machine that cleaned and dried dishes, a zipper to keep clothes on, and a 264-foot tall wheel with boxcars that rotated 2,000 plus passengers at a time around to view the fair from above.
Oh my goodness.
Mr. Ferris's wheel most assuredly out-Eiffeled Eiffel. And no one even mentioned London's Crystal Palace again. The Midway Plaisance was show-stopping, with Mr. Ferris's wheel, a tethered hot air balloon, and an ice railway toboggan ride.
Oh my goodness.
I loved the thrill of the rides, but the education of other cultures I acquired on the Midway, Sitting Bull's cabin brought all the way from South Dakota, we really have conquered the savages.
Oh my goodness, yes. We are those people.
We are those people. We were conquered.
Yes.
Music and dance of a real Dahomean village and Algerian village, a Moorish palace, Cairo Street, where a woman did a strange, provocative dance, her belly the focus, and camel ride. There was a Japanese bazaar, German, Samoan, and Irish villages. Soul Bloom's Midway should be a staple of every fair, world, state, and county from here on out. The 23-year-old's mile-long walkway had showstoppers at every step. But after dark, that was the real magic. Electric lights everywhere in the buildings lining the streets. Everything glowed without the smoke, black residue, and smell of gas power. The fireworks were remarkable over the Grand Basin. The sound was deafening, but the explosions of color lasting a full hour was a sight to behold, especially George Washington's silhouette in the sky and lights. Nothing will ever compare to the magic of the Columbian Exposition. No one will believe the things I saw there. My Rand McNally map of the grounds, exposition $50, and commemorative ticket will be the talk of the town for decades. I wish I could have purchased a Tiffany & Company commemorative vase. I'm sure it will be worth $100,000 in the future.
Wow. That, when you think about that time period, I mean, that is like walking into this whole big emerald city. That must be how they felt when they walked into the Wizard of Oz and they saw everything that it had to offer.
Did you know it inspired the Wizard of Oz?
I did not know that. I had no idea. Yes. But I was just thinking.
Yes, that is it. What you saw when you walked in is what inspired Baum's Wizard of Oz.
I had no idea about that. I was just thinking about, I mean, because you think about the time, most people nobody had electric power. You didn't.
There were a few wealthy people here and there that were trying it. There was actually 2 electric companies.
Okay.
At the time, there was General Electric.
Okay, yes.
And Westinghouse. So General Electric was Edison.
Okay.
Westinghouse was Nikola Tesla.
The Tesla, yes.
And they both bid to provide the power grid for the Grand.
Who won?
Westinghouse. With their alternating current electric.
Oh, I do love a good alternating current.
Me too.
Where would we be without it? Wow.
There's so many things introduced at this time. The Ferris wheel came about because the Eiffel Tower, a few years prior at the World's Fair in Paris.
Okay.
It was supposed to be a temporary structure, just showing how high we could build, and you know.
Really?
It wasn't supposed to last forever, but it was such a big hit that it lasted forever. One of the main goals, they had inventors from all over the U.S. running ideas past Daniel Burnham, the goal was to out Eiffel.
I like that, out Eiffel.
Yes.
Okay,
who actually had a proposal as well that they considered.
Oh, did they? But he didn't.
But it upset Americans that they even considered Eiffel when it needed to go to an American.
I agree with them.
Yeah, and he did. So Ferris's wheel was monstrous. I messed that word up. Was a monstrosity at the time. Even compared to Ferris wheels now, like each car would hold up to 40 to 60 people.
Oh my goodness.
This thing was 30 foot wide from outside to outside.
And there were no accidents on the Ferris wheel. It all went well.
Everything went well. There was even a huge storm in the midst of the fair. People on the Ferris wheel, when it happened, there was a tornado.
Really?
It blew out some windows, bent some of the iron in a car.
But everything
was fine.
Wow. Okay, so the World's Fair was a time for everyone to showcase. It traveled,
yes.
People got together at different countries, and they decided where it would be, and that was a time for them to showcase.
Yes. Well, it was at this time. That's kind of how they do them now.
Okay.
The countries bid on it. So the last one that was in the U.S. was in '84 in New Orleans.
Okay.
The most recent one was, I think, Algeria or something in 2019.
Really?
So they still happen, but this was a time to showcase everybody's grand ideas, like shredded wheat, which, by the way, was not a big hit at the World's Fair.
Now,
however, it still exists today because of the World's Fair.
It does. The World's Fair has brought many a good thing and many a bad.
Many a crazy.
Lots of crazy, but lots of good.
Aunt Jemima, her pancake mix was, the greatest invention for little housewives that were
you didn't have
making
to
it from scratch.
Yes. Because in our day, when you use instant pancake mix. Now you're making it from scratch.
Right? But at this time,
At that time, they really made
it
it
had
from
all
scratch.
the ingredients in the box. You just added eggs and water, and
It was a whole new world.
I know.
I cannot even imagine how they
You
must
didn't
have.
have to measure that baking soda.
Who knows what baking soda is? I know it's kind of different from baking powder, but
I
I always
don't
think
know
you can use them interchangeably. I
Yeah,
could be
you
wrong
really
on
can't.
that.
But
You can't? Okay. Well, explain
But
a
I
lot
don't know why.
over the years. Just explain a lot. Okay, we are living like in the Gilded Age, correct? During this
This
time,
is
there's
during
been
the
a lot
Gilded
of
Age.
historical things that have happened.
Right. And the
before-
buildings that were built were a perfect example of gilded. They were supposed to be temporary structures. They were built as temporary structures with like a stucco marble kind of look.
Oh, like
that was
White City. Yes.
That was meant, I mean, even with the entire thing being a temporary, we're going to tear this down as soon as it's over, it cost $14 million in that time to put this on.
Really?
Which is a prime example of the Gilded Age.
Yes.
Like, it was all.
Yes, the Gilded Age, where you have that tension between classes, and we have this big economic boom going on for certain people. We're right after the Industrial Revolution. We're in the midst of all of this going on.
Yes.
And it's just a fascinating age for some.
For some, and for others, not. So
not.
much.
And this was, the World Fair was also based on Columbus's voyage to the United States, correct?
This one was
that
supposed
was kind of
the
part
theme,
of the theme.
the Columbian World's Fair, yes. And it was to commemorate the 400th anniversary, which was actually in 1892 when it was proposed and planned.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, I was singing my song.
Yeah, 1492,
Columbus sailed the ocean blue.
Yeah.
Right.
So it missed it by a little bit, which was fine because Columbus never actually stepped foot in the U.S. anyway. So having it in Chicago.
And Chicago had the big fire. They've survived the big fire.
Yes.
They're bouncing back from that. This was a great way for them to showcase.
Barely 20 years, 22 years prior, most of the city was wiped out and they rebuilt. Wow. And at this point in time, just before they won the bid, which was voted on by Congress, just before that, they moved up in rank to the second largest city in the U.S.
Oh, really? I'm
right
assuming
behind
New York.
New York, yeah.
Okay. Assuming New York would be the first.
Yeah, but this was prime example of the Gilded Age.
Oh, yes. Political corruption is rampant.
Yes.
We have the variation between the classes as it continues to grow and to become more distinct. The haves have more, the have-nots
have less.
Not. Yes, yes. A distinct separation of classes and
of
races.
Classes and races.
So
and
that's
this
a whole...
This is, 30, 40 years after the emancipation and abolition of slavery.
Right.
At this time, 70 to 80% of the U.S.'s black population lived in the South.
Right. Okay.
This is around the time the Great Migration started. So they're starting to move north. African Americans are starting to move to northern cities, which is creating new issues they never had before. They were self-sufficient almost, and now they have this influx of people that are looking for work and looking for homes. And so now the North is feeling this shift in class that they not really, there were wealthy people, there were poor people before, but not to the extent.
Yes, the diversity was not near as expansive.
And it was so broken up that they didn't really notice. Like the wealthy stayed in their little wealthy community, the poor stayed in their poor community, and And, we're not driving. We're not.
Nobody's on Facebook.
Nobody's on Facebook.
Right. So as long as the poor stayed in their world and stayed kind of out of ours, unless they were here to work for us.
Right.
Yes.
And the poor kind of felt that way too. Like, just stay in your world and leave us alone. Don't be making rules for us down here.
Right.
But there wasn't the in your face that there is now.
Right. Okay.
So this migration where the poor are having to fight an influx of people, well, not only with the African Americans migration north, but also immigrants coming in.
Oh, yes, because there was a huge influx of immigrants during this time.
So they're having their class sanctions and differences are more noticeable to them now.
Right.
When they weren't before. So it's just an odd time.
Oh, it sounds like just a very strange odd time.
Daniel Burnham was the architect who planned the fair.
Okay.
He was a Chicago architect. Chicago at this time didn't have high rises and skyscrapers and wasn't building up like New York was.
Spreading.
Because of the ground. Because of it was kind of swampy. We've got the Great Lakes there.
Right there. There's a lot of,
Yeah, so building up required new innovations.
Okay.
Barnum and his partner Root, who also got the bid but passed away from probably pneumonia, some kind of
plague.
Maybe.
Probably not, but pneumonia.
Yeah, pretty sure it was pneumonia. But Root is actually the one who kind of solved that problem with like a floating sub floor.
Really?
Digging it deep, pouring concrete, rebar. He made it so that it didn't sink. Wow. So Chicago was finally getting to build up.
So that is impressive.
Yeah. Which was what kind of shot Root and Barnum into the spotlights in this area and got him the bid.
Because that at the time was such an engineering marvel.
Right.
To be able to take that and to grow Chicago up, and this helped change Chicago.
Chicago was already changing, and this made it world known.
Right. Okay.
The changes and this.
It's not like the Tulsa State Fair we have now that lasts a week. This thing went on.
This went from May to October.
Okay, that's a very long fair.
The start of May. Most of the world's fairs were 6 months to a year.
Wow. Do you have any idea how many people came during that time?
The day that had the most people, there were almost 800,000 in one day. I think it was about 4 million people across the 6 months. It started out rocky. The U.S. had dumped taxpayer dollars in here. Banks and wealthy people had dumped their own money. It was funded by Congress and then was matched by wealthy people and businesses. So they started building this fair 2 years before it started.
Okay.
So it took 2 years. It's almost 700 acres.
That's a lot of land.
Yes.
That's a lot of land.
And they had the big, the transportation building, the manufacturers and liberal arts building. There were architects primarily from New York and a couple from Chicago that each had their own big building in the Court of Honors, which was going to showcase, big things.
Right.
But then, each state and territory in the U.S. had their own building to showcase their things. Countries had their own buildings. Actually, Haiti had a building in there. So at this time, there is that distinct, I don't know if we're technically Jim Crow yet, but I can't remember when Jim Crow started.
I can't remember either. Sorry.
But there was, we don't mix and mingle.
Right. Yes.
So black people weren't allowed to partake in the fair, to enjoy the fair. They could work there.
But they could not just go enjoy it.
They couldn't just go be fair patrons.
Really?
Haiti had a building. So we had Frederick Douglass and Ida B. Wells and all of these prominent African Americans who were already pointing out the differences and give us credit for what we're doing.
Yes.
So the Haitian government allowed Frederick Douglass to use their building.
Not anyone from the United States. With Frederick Douglass being a U.S. citizen, but the Haitian did. Well, thank goodness.
Right. So he has this big speech prepared. They had made pamphlets to pass out. They passed them out in this building. There were black protesters already. So the Haitians allowed them to use their building.
I love it.
Frederick Douglass had a speech prepared to discuss the accomplishments of black Americans and the discrimination of black Americans. During his speech, he was heckled by white people out in the audience, talking about, somebody said something about the Negro problem, and he threw his speech away and addressed it right there.
Oh, good for him.
I've got...
Oh, I want to hear it.
I don't have the whole thing, but he said, "There is, in fact, no such problem. The real problem has been given a false name. It is called Negro for a purpose. It has substituted Negro for nation because the one is despised and hated, the other is loved and honored. The true problem is the national problem. Further, the problem is whether the American people have honesty enough, loyalty enough, honor enough, patriotism enough to live up to their own Constitution." Wow. And then he concluded by declaring, "Look at the progress the Negroes has made in 30 years. Measure the Negro not by the standard of the splendid civilization of the Caucasian. Bend down and measure him from the depths out of which he has risen."
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. He ended up publishing it in a pamphlet, spurred the civil rights movement.
Did he receive any repercussions from his speech at the time? I mean, was there...
Not any more than the typical hecklers. He was already a prominent man.
Oh, yes.
At this time, and this speech in particular, when the civil rights movement really took off, and his speeches were used a lot
to help spur the civil rights movement
and to show that this has been 100 years we've been asking for this.
Yes.
Frederick, he had a newspaper.
Yes.
He was also real influential in women's suffrage.
Right.
So he is the reason women get to vote, one of them. He was influential in the abolition of slavery, in African Americans voting rights. So he was already taken seriously.
Right. He was out on the forefront of the civil rights movement.
He was already respected as much as people at this time respected black men, I guess. Ida B. Wells organized a boycott of the fair because of the discrimination.
Wow.
She had a pamphlet drawn up and passed out.
So it was this big political movement going on undertones underneath the fair.
So they finally were like, okay, you know what? We're going to let you guys come over and play for one day. Colored America Day was August 25th.
Oh, separate but equal. We'll give you one day.
Yes, one day. I don't, which, we're honoring Columbus, so we're kind of... We are setting the tone right there with that.
I mean, let's if we just start with the Columbian Exchange and everything that happened there in the first...
we are honoring the man who decided that... Well, it was already decided long before Columbus that, the white European nations were better and more civilized and smarter, and
we needed to
we had to take over and teach them how to be
the best
people.
they could be.
Yes.
Meanwhile, I think we were all just happy doing the things that we did in our own little indigenous world. But because while all of this was going on, so you have this, there was a women's movement too, because if I remember, the fair was not going to be open on Sunday, but there was a women's group.
The fair was opened on Sunday, and the women's group is the reason it was closed.
Okay, gotcha.
And it was actually the women's temperance movement.
Okay, and they were like,
it was, we gotta have a day to calm down and relax. Wild Bill.
Yes, I was going to say
he was really excited about them being closed on Sunday because it brought more people to him, because he wasn't technically a part of the fair, so he didn't have to follow the fair rules.
Because he could not. Let's talk about the Native Americans too, because we know what was going on with.
Yes. So we're commandeering land, acquiring land with treaties that they are signing willingly. To move. Because that's how it happened, right?
They just came up to us and said, hey.
And then there was, our little tribe who said, no, we're going to fight you for this.
Yes, the Chickamauga Cherokee.
We decided to fight, and that's why we're not federally recognized.
And we just had the Battle of Wounded Knee in 1890, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so this is, we get the fair in 92, and... Then they start building, and they're trying to get everything figured out. And what is their thought on Native Americans at this time, and how they're going to?
Well, they're
because we're not going to let any of the blacks in. They get they get to come for one day, and they can work,
and they can work there. Native Americans were a novelty. The general consensus at the time was they were uneducated, and they needed the white man.
Savages.
Yes, they were savages. They needed the white man to teach them how to life, because, we
need to know how to build wealth and destroy the environment.
Yes.
I mean, who better to explain capitalism to us than
the white man?
Than the white man. Okay.
However, there was, some things they did that was just kind of cute. We wanted to see and watch. And so on the Midway, which was not a thing. Every fair now has a Midway. It was not a thing prior to this fair.
Well, see, we should be thankful, yes, because I love a good Midway.
He was an impresionario. He actually ended up being a congressman, served 14 terms in Senate. I think, possibly House. I don't remember, in Congress.
Okay.
But this 23-year-old kid was in charge of the novelty. So he designs his Midway.
Okay.
He owned a troop of Algerians.
That the 23-year-old man did?
Yeah.
Okay.
That he had purchased in France. And he brought them over. He wanted to be in this. And
I'm really
Barnum was like, no.
Okay.
We don't don't bring your Algerians over here.
Oh, okay.
Somehow a friend of his, there was a bid for the novelty side of it, and I can't remember what they actually called it, but just the interesting, fun walk part.
Right. Okay.
And his friend got him that bid.
Aha.
So then he got to bring his Algerians over.
Okay, so
he was real excited about it.
Okay, so the Algerians were
They were on the Midway.
Okay.
It was almost like a human zoo.
Wow.
So they had Algerians, they had Samoans, they even had Germans and Irish villages, like faux villages set up. They had Egyptians that did belly dances that.
I do love a good belly dance.
Mm-hmm. And the na 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 was written by Saul Bloom, the impresario that organized this midway.
It did not originate in Egypt.
No,
to
it
get the
did
snake
not.
out of the
It
basket.
did not have anything to do with snakes,
I
baskets,
think
or Egypt.
You have just kind of
I've ruined the world.
Yes, you've ruined the world.
But he composed that for this fair as well. But they were just kind of set up. They had dismantled Sitting Bull's cabin in South Dakota. Wow. And brought it to Chicago. Rebuilt it as like a novelty for people to look at.
And also during this time, the people that were a part of the fair were going out across the United States and trying to find artifacts that were Native American that they could bring into this area.
Yeah, to show off. And,
And
because the way they lived, so uneducated and
happy,
happy was just fascinating to everybody. Something to gawk at.
Plus, they also wanted to, to showcase how the Columbian Exchange had benefited the Native Americans, right?
Yes.
Okay. So
and
if we
how,
bring them here,
now they're smart and they know you own the land and you fight for what you want and you speak English and you don't whistle in the woods.
So during this time, let me see if I've gotten this straight. The American blacks are not allowed to come to the fair until they pass the one day.
The one day. They got a day.
Okay.
And the Haitians.
Right.
We're okay with it.
The Haitians were okay. They brought them in so other countries could bring in, but we could not. Meanwhile, there's this undertow of, hey, let's bring the indigenous Native Americans in here. Let's get them in so we can showcase what a benefit we have been for them and
all the good we've done. Yes.
And if I remember reading this correctly, there were several Native American groups and tribes that used this for their benefit because they actually, I think there was one, I read that there was an elder in a tribe that was selling indigenous wisdom.
Good for him. I don't think it helped. He should have sold harder. He should have sold more.
So, but they were trying to sell their wares and trying to get money so that they could take that back to the tribe and they could find a way to prosper. Yeah. Okay. So, and then we have also going on at that same time during our Gilded Age thing, we have the White City and all of the promise and everything that American can hold for that
everything because
class of people.
We're lighting everything with gas power at this point. So electricity does exist, but
not in the majority of
most people don't have it. Most people have never even seen it.
Right.
Everything is covered in like this black residue.
Oh yeah. There's a whole peppered moth story that
goes
into
from the Industrial Revolution. It was white
and right.
Evolved to black to blend. So walking in and seeing this pristine, white, beautiful city was breathtaking.
Well, yes.
The rest of Chicago was not pretty.
By any means.
But
no.
And it's set up against Lake Michigan is the backdrop of it. It's right on the beach.
Beautiful. I think to some,
breathtaking.
maybe what the Bible would say that paradise looks like.
Sitting on the hill.
The city on the hill. Yeah.
Yeah. And the architecture from this ended up influencing, still today, our downtown Tulsa.
Oh, yeah. If you hadn't had a chance to take an architectural tour of downtown Tulsa, just a plug, go do it. It's awesome.
It is. But a lot of what is there, the architecture was influenced by the White City. They made the Beaux Arts neoclassical design popular.
Oh, really? I love that.
Yes. So, and then of course there was the icky. America's first serial killer outside of the fair in Chicago at the time, but because of the fair. He moved to Chicago. H.H. Holmes. He moved to Chicago, and in lots of shady business deals and aliases, built this murder castle.
I have heard of the murder castle.
He had a crematorium in it. He had secret rooms that would gas you, like gas chamber rooms. In this mansion, he had an autopsy room.
Oh my. He was serious.
Yeah. And he designed this himself.
Okay.
Hired out the labor, and he oversaw the labor, and he would let them build so much, but to keep people from finding out what was going on there, he would nitpick,
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, your work's not good enough, you're fired, I'm not paying you. So he was saving money, not paying people anyway.
Right.
But the main reason he did that was to make sure people didn't know.
So the next crew would not know what had already been completed by the first crew. So they're thinking, right, he's a little crazy. He's got one crematory, but not all the others.
H.H. Holmes wasn't even his real name. Several women had moved to Chicago for the work that the exhibition, the Columbian Exposition, the World's Fair, was going to bring. So he had, on his murder castle, the bottom floor is businesses. He has a pharmacy and he's a doctor, so he has a pharmacy and medical practice. He has a restaurant. He has all of these businesses that explain the weird smell for the apartments and hotel up above.
So you don't think,
So, nobody had any idea. Like, parents hired private investigators to find their daughters that they knew had stayed there. And he was such a soothsayer. They moved to Europe, and when they come home,
it wasn't as easy to...
Right, it wasn't as easy to track people down. They had, what is the private eye? Pinkerton.
Yes, Pinkerton.
Pinkerton was, that was like the first...
How long did he start his killing spree prior to the...
More than likely.
Is there any idea how many?
Not a clue.
Not a clue. It could be.
So he wrote 3 or 4 different confessions, and each one was different. And he confessed to killing people that were still alive, and all sorts of. He was found guilty of murder, but not of any of the women who went missing that they know were there.
Wow.
He had a partner, and he killed his partner. He took out a life insurance policy on his partner.
Not in the killing, or just in business?
In life, everything. He was married to 4 or 5 different women, had fathered several different children. This man was married, had 5 kids, but he knew what was going on.
Oh, so he knew about all of everything underneath this.
Yes. So people are starting to suspect police, Pinkerton. They're not necessarily that Holmes had done it, but Holmes went into business with 3 other people. That didn't exist. They were all Holmes. I mean, they're not checking IDs or anything at this time. So he would buy furniture under his boss's name, which was completely made up, so that whenever they came back to collect the payment, they're like, well, he's not here, you'll have to come back later. Well, he doesn't exist, so he's never going to be there, so he got free furniture. Wow. I mean, he was brilliant.
He was, yes.
For the time. None of this is going to work now, but...
Right, but for that time.
But for that time. So he decides it's time to leave Chicago. And he takes out a life insurance policy on his partner. They leave. He kills him. They know he did this. So they call his wife and ask his wife, who is in Chicago, to come up here and identify the body. Well, the wife can't, so she sends her 15-year-old daughter. Holmes takes the daughter home and convinces the wife to let him take the 15-year-old daughter, the 11-year-old daughter, and a 8-year-old boy. And then the mom kept, I think there were 4, the mom kept the baby at home. So he travels with these kids for quite a while. The boy gets on his nerves, so he kills him, but tells the two girls that he's put him in an institution or a boarding school or something similar to that. Tells the mom that the girls have gone to Europe.
A lot of people went to Europe.
They did. They did go to Europe. Anyway, they end up, they catch him in Boston, is where he killed, I don't even pretend like I'm going to be able to pronounce the name right, but it was like Paislewig or something like that. So this Boston detective travels to all these towns that he was in, Toronto, Indianapolis,
trying to put everything,
piecing all of this together.
Okay.
He's the one who finds the two girls in a house, like
they're
down.
Alive.
No.
Oh, okay.
No. So he does end up killing the girls, and he rents a house under an assumed name and buries them in the floorboard. Or in the basement. Buries them in the basement. Borrows a shovel from a neighbor. So this detective is going there to track these girls down and hears all these stories. He digs up the girls. So then he's circling back, trying to figure out where this boy is. Finds the boy in Chicago because he had come back.
Okay.
And he was dead also. So while he's in Chicago, is hearing about all these girls that went missing that had stayed at this mansion, palace, castle, whatever he called it. It was just crazy. Just absolute crazy story. He's the first known psychopath, America's first serial killer.
Wow.
And all of this was happening at the same time as the fair, the World's Fair, and they had no idea.
Oh my goodness.
It was 2 years later.
So there's no telling how many
Right.
went missing from the fair. Or from
There
the area.
are 5 or 6 that they know were in his castle.
So is his castle still around today? Do you know? They tore it down, and
He actually burned the top floor of it to collect the insurance, but they had already kind of caught on to him. Not really, but kind of.
right.
And the insurance company would not release the check to him. His business partner had to come pick it up himself.
And the business partner
didn't
had
exist.
Oh, okay.
It was one of the
aliases.
One of the 3 or 4, and he put all of them, 3 or 4 aliases, and they all owned the thing together. But this one guy was the main owner, but none of them existed.
How old was he during this time?
In his 20s and 30s. He died
Really?
in his mid-30s. He was executed by hanging in his mid-30s. So he did all of this in his 20s.
Well, the World's Fair has a little bit of everything.
Everything. A little bit of everything.
going on in the Gilded Age.
Uh-huh.
Goodness gracious.
Yeah.
Here you have this
amazing
incredible
adventure. And
then you have the side note. You have
all of these little side notes. There was a
notes
financial crisis at the start of the fair. They were expecting hundreds of thousands of people a day. The first month or two, because of a financial crisis, banks were failing across the U.S.
Yeah, that was a kind of a tough time. Yeah.
So the panic of 1893 was
Yeah.
happening, banks and financial crisis on top of this. And the first couple of months, they were only seeing tens of thousands a day visiting the fair when
my goodness,
they
that's
had
like 1/10 of how many people
they were expected, and that they had spent millions of dollars planning to recoup. At that rate, they weren't ever going to recoup the money. It was going to be a failure.
Right.
Which is when Saul Bloom, he was already involved. He already had his Midway, but then he started planning certain things on certain days and brought in more people. The fireworks show on July 4th that was the biggest day so far. And then there was America Day, Columbus Day. We have a federal holiday because of the fair.
Columbus Day?
Yes.
Well,
which is now Indigenous People Day.
Indigenous People Day, yes.
So the fair is the reason that is a federal holiday.
But because it was the Columbian Fair, Columbus Fair, then it's like, well, let's make this a national holiday on this day.
And
and now
we
we
spent so much time discovering Chicago.
Oh, yeah.
In October, apparently. Apparently in October.
They also had life-size replicas of the Nina, the Pina, and the Santa Maria.
Yep.
Okay, so I did all that out.
Right there on Lake
Please
Michigan.
forgive me my...
life-size replicas.
Mr. Sullivan, my history teacher from high school. Yes, life-size replicas that were not made in the United States, right? They were made and then...
just sailed on over.
Sailed on over. So we were hit not once but twice by the Nina, the Pina, and the Santa Maria.
Yeah, right there out
those
Lake
were
Michigan. You would just walk on
so
there.
far away from them. Pretty awesome. A lot of it.
There was a lot
stuff going on at the fair. I mean,
and this wasn't the first World's Fair in the U.S. either. This was the first, the most influential. There was one in Philadelphia. Yeah.
Right.
There had also been one in New York already.
In New York, right.
Yeah, the one right before this was in Philadelphia, and it was in the 1880s, I think, and then there was one in the 1870s in New York. But this one surpassed every World's Fair in every country. This one surpassed Paris's.
Oh, did it really?
Yes.
As far as the amount of people that came?
Yes, and the money
that was made. And
yeah, by the time it was said and done, 4 million people had visited.
And people would travel from other countries.
Yep.
I mean, jump on that. It was nothing to jump on that
Titanic or whatever.
Freightliner and get on across the big sea. Wow.
I mean, there were railways then, and there were cars, kind of like the crank.
Oh yeah,
Model Ts,
right.
But nothing people had. And
right.
I mean, those cars only went 8 miles an hour anyway, so
right.
it's not like you were traveling far in that.
Yes, you better just hop a train and get
so
there.
Right, most of the travel there was by train or by ferry or boats. I mean, you weren't hitching up your wagon.
And again, so when we talk about the Gilded Age and separation of class, then it would be that there were a lot of the population that couldn't make it to the fair. You just can't.
The average pay for a worker at this time was $1.10 a day. So 50 cents was almost half your day's pay. I mean, can you imagine paying half a day's pay just to walk in the door, and then you'd need the other day. You got to finish out that day so you can ride the 50-cent Ferris wheel. And,
yes, and then you have to have the transportation because you.
And you're staying in a hotel.
And you're having to stay because you're not just going to.
Yeah. So it was expensive. Lots of people still attended.
Well, it sounds like lots of people did.
Illinois area, a lot of workers. That was one of the biggest deals about the Sunday you were talking about when the temperance movement closed it on Sunday. That was the only day that most working families had off together. So that was why there was such a big controversy over it. Why it was such a big deal, because I work 6 days a week, 17-hour days to make my $1.10.
Right.
Wow. That is my only day off. It's the only day I get to take my family to this thing I can't even afford anyway, and you're closing it on that day. Which, furthered that whole class
separation of class. Yes. Yes.
People had lots of fun at the fair. Frederick Douglass put some people in their place. That was good too.
Yes. The Native Americans.
They were great entertainment.
Yeah, great entertainment. They finally got to go maybe just a little bit. Okay, well, I'll sell you my wisdom.
That's right.
We're gonna make a little profit off of you all. So, what a great time!
I know. Good times. Good times happened. I mean, and for real, it did put. America's not a world power at this time.
Right. We're still young. Very
young.
We're still young now compared to most countries.
I mean, we're not nearly as world powerful as we pretend we are now.
That is true.
But we weren't even going to pretend at this time.
Right.
But this kind of got us notoriety that, okay, you guys can do something grand.
If they'd only known about homes right at the time,
they would have been impressed, I'm sure.
Yes. We could add that to the...
Jack the Ripper was... 2 years before this in London? So they'd
already had their little London.
There's
World Fair. How often did the World Fair come around? Do you remember back then? Was it like...
It wasn't... I don't believe it was any like time frame.
Not like the Olympics for every 4 years.
Right. It was just we've got to showcase our new cars. We've got to showcase
We have all
electric
of this-
light and
Yes.
dishwashers.
Uh-huh.
And,
We have some
and
great
the
things we
zipper,
wanna
your
share.
britches can
Yes.
stay up without buttons.
We have the savages under control.
We got the savages under control.
Let's have a world fair.
Uh-huh.
I'm Native American, so I say that with jest.
Yes.
But
It was just to showcase something grand and
so still, when you can only imagine the people of that time coming up and I mean, seeing that for the first time and seeing the White City and seeing everything that had been built and the lights and all of that that's going on, and then all of the other stuff that's kind of hidden underneath that as America starts to continues to grow to become.
yeah. And I mean, Chicago had a bad reputation as being stinky. Sanitation was poor.
Oh yeah.
Not to mention, plumbing wasn't. We were just running pipes from homes into lakes and rivers.
Oh
and
yes, the pollution.
it's just floating back into the city.
We can get into the environmental issues.
Yes.
a whole
We
nother
weren't
time.
worried about those at this time.
Yes. So, if we wanted to go to Chicago, some of the remnants of the fair are still there.
There
All
are
of the remnants are gone.
I know of 2 buildings that are museums now are still there, but majority of it is gone.
Long gone.
Majority of it was destroyed by a fire a year later.
Oh,
But
that's right.
it was intended to be taken down.
Because it was just it was all
It
temporary.
was all facade and
again like the Wizard of Oz.
yes. The Manufacturers and Liberal Arts building is still standing. It's a museum. And then there was one that was part of the fair but was more kind of downtown that is still there and a museum. They were steel concrete structures. The rest were wood and some kind of fake stucco kind of type thing to mimic marble.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So
Gotcha.
it's not there. Olmsted did. It was swampy area, and he dug waterways and lagoons and built this big, pretty park. Built islands in it, and those are all still standing. Jackson Park is still there.
So Jackson Park, we could go to Jackson Park.
And Jackson Park was where it was held.
Well, okay.
So a lot of the changes to the land is still there, but the buildings
structures
are gone. So,
Well, very interesting.
let us know your thoughts and be sure to subscribe so you can come back and see us later. Thanks
Thank
for
you,
watching.
guys.